Hi, I'm Tanya Valentin, a neuroaffirming family coach from New Zealand who supports parents to navigate their neurodivergent child's burnout recovery.
And I'm Emma Gilmour, an alcohol, food, and body image counsellor from Australia, helping women rethink their relationship with alcohol and with themselves. Welcome to Meltdowns, Menopause and Magic, a podcast where two late diagnosed mums talk honestly about midlife, neurodivergence, parenting children in burnout, and finding ourselves again along the way.
If you've ever felt overwhelmed, unsure, or like you're the only one struggling,
You're not alone here. Grab a cup of tea and come and sit with us. Hey, Tanya.
Hey, Emma.
Look at that. Look at how smooth it is this morning.
I know.
Everything's arriving. We're just waiting for the actual podcast to arrive as well. I was just saying that we were going to be talking about subject close to my heart, friendships.
Yes. I think that this is a topic that comes up a lot, especially for, neurodivergent women, because friendships is something that's really hard for us to navigate.
Agreed. And it's interesting as well, I think, like reading other people's autistic or ADHD experiences and thinking, gosh, I resonate that so much, beginning, so to speak. But I feel like when I was in my ultimate high masking, before I stopped drinking, before I found out I was autistic ADHD, I looked at my history with a different lens around friendships than perhaps I do now. That makes sense.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
Yeah. One of the things that I always look back on as being one of my steps into high masking was a friendship breakup. And I also kind of relate it as well to the beginning of my drinking and smoking and all of that kind of stuff, where I'm trying to perform this other human being than the human being I perhaps naturally was. And basically what happened, I was kind of 11. And now I'm thinking of it, it feels like a bit of a pattern. I was 11 and I'd just gone to school. I'd gone to school in England. My family lived in Africa. We lived in Africa growing up. And we went to boarding school in England because there wasn't a secondary school where we lived that we could go to, or that was the right thing that all that my parents wanted us to go to. So went over to England and I made friends with a girl, and I was a boarding girl and she was a day girl. And we just really clicked. And I'd go to her house at weekends and, I really felt like we were really close, kind of best friends, really. And we were quite young in our behavior. So even though we were kind of 11, 12, we'd play in like the, school break times, and we'd like play make believe and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, after probably a year of friendship, she decided she didn't want to be my friend anymore. And it was quite strange. It was almost like a romantic breakup. And she was going to want to be friends with somebody else. And I can't remember a great amount of the detail of it. I think there might have been a letter, but I was heartbroken, and I didn't understand what had happened, and I didn't understand what I'd done wrong. And so I internalized it as, I'm not acceptable as I am, and I need to change in order to be somebody that somebody can be friends with. And so the way that I did that was I started looking at who were the popular people, what were they doing? And, because of course, great mimicry, great camouflaging, we all kind of a lot of us, one of the very common things I hear is, that we have this ability to kind of take on the shape of, they're like shapeshifters, right? And I remember my dad being like that. I remember as a kid, my dad being able to walk into any room and exactly morph into the other people that were there so that he fit in. And so with this, I was like, well, okay, well, the cool people seem to be smoking and drinking. I can do that. Then I can be part of that group. But also more that, in a way I could sort of be an outlier too. And I don't need to rely on anybody then as well. It's like I'm sufficient, self-sufficient. And that was probably the beginning of me creating the part of the persona that I kind of then went on to sort of maintain for most of my teens and adult life. How about yourself?
Well, I remember very, very early, like in primary school. It's so funny. I didn't know that you grew up in Africa, because I grew up in Africa too.
How funny.
Yeah, I'm originally from South Africa. So yeah. In primary school, I remember like looking, and even I think if I think back to kindergarten, I remember finding it really difficult to make friends. And a part of me was like, well, maybe I just didn't get like the thing that helps you to make friends, you know? Um, I always sort of felt on the outside. And then as I grew up, I thought maybe it's because like my family is like ultra religious and they were very conservative. And I remember my parents, my mum was saying to me, well, you're the pastor's child, so you always have to like show a good example. And so I grew up with this sort of like from a very young age around masking and being the example. And so then I thought, well, okay, what the people in my class that seem to be kind of getting recognition and things like that, they're like the clever kids, right? So then I tried really hard to push myself in academics, be the top of the class. And I thought, okay, that's sort of like leadership or like um that's sort of part of the class is going to be like my little niche where I can fit in. Because I can't focus on friendships. So I'm going to focus on being like the best when it comes to like academics. And I wasn't very like athletic either. So
Yeah.
I almost feel like I have dyspraxia because I've been very clumsy. Haven't been able to like didn't have coordination or like handball sort of thing. It's always been like really difficult for me. And then I got to a place in high school, which I think is kind of like, might be similar or just like slightly older than you, where the pressure of holding that mask together, of being the perfect, like academic kid just broke. And I was like, I just can't do this anymore. And so then I started hanging around with the kids that were kind of like the misfits, the smokers, the drinkers. That was sort of a bit later for me, maybe like 16 or 17. And it's quite weird because I think back now, like my mum, she was just so shocked by this. I think that one of the teachers phoned her and said, we found this packet of cigarettes in her school bag. And my mum coming to pick me up from school and saying, there's something wrong with you. I've booked you into the therapist, and then like dragging me off to therapy because I was just so different. But then it was only like a couple of years where I hung out with these kids. And then I decided that perhaps like the friendships were very hollow.
Yeah.
That I was going to pull away a little bit and I was just going to focus on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized about those friendships was that not one single person from that friendship group like try to figure out why I left or why I wasn't going to these parties anymore. It was like I didn't even exist, even though these people had been in my house, I'd been to their house. And so from that sort of time, I was very much a loner and kind of thought, I just didn't get the friendship gene. And I would have sort of periods of making friendships, but then not being able to maintain them. And then just internalizing it as like, well, I'm just sort of like unlovable and then I got married really young too. I got married when I was 21. Yeah. So it was easier to kind of be part of a couple than just me being on my own. So that's sort of my history with friendships, I suppose.
It's interesting, isn't it? When you were saying that, I was thinking about something that's happened to me quite recently. But I'll take a little bit back, because I think for me as well, it's been a real surprise to me where I've ended up, because I masked so well and I created this persona that was very, I think I felt a little bit of soreness around friendships, but not very often, because from then on, I was acting the part. And I very much think that drinking and things like that were very useful for me in that context. But I really thought I was a sociable, very extroverted person. And that was my belief about myself. And if somebody had asked me, I did lots of personality tests when I was working in corporate, I came out as those things. So deeply was it kind of it was a great mask. And so I would always be about, the girls' weekends away, these great, these big evenings out, these big kind of gang activities. And I really was doing that a lot until probably until really I stopped drinking. And that was when, for me, drinking was the biggest mask of all of them. And it was only when I stopped drinking that I was able to see the performance and realize what I was doing and what I liked and what I didn't like and who I was and who I wasn't, because it had kept that hidden from me for a really long time. And then post drinking, I kind of pulled away from my friendship group a bit. Some people stayed, some people didn't. It was all fine. Didn't really think about it much. And then during COVID, I made friends with a group locally, and we were a swimming group, and we'd go swimming, big community group, fantastic group, go swimming in the mornings. And the idea was there was regular times that people would leave and you could just show up, and it didn't matter if you didn't know anybody, and you could just go swimming together, which sounded lovely. And I met a group of women, and we formed a book group. And I really was so happy. I was like, these are my people. These are really cool, clever women, thoughtful. And it was called the Brené Brown Book Club. And I was so proud of it. I was like, this is so great. And all the way through kind of COVID and post, we met and we did like really slowly the gifts of imperfection and stuff like that. And I loved, what I really liked about them is that they drank, but they didn't drink like I used to drink. So they'd go and you go around to somebody's house and they'd have a drink, and then they'd have a cup of tea, which was, to me, was like, what is this world? I don't understand it. But after COVID, we started having these regular Zooms, and I kept showing up. I kept feeling this real feeling of I'm having to mask really hard. I can't be myself. I'm having to watch every word I say. And this went on for like about 6 months. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to take the bull by the horns, and I'm going to let them know that that's how I'm feeling in the group. So I'm going to I spent ages, I wrote this email, and I was like, this is how I'm feeling in the group. I'm probably not going to carry on being in the group and Zoom context. But if any of you would like to be one-to-one friends with me, where we can be unmasked and be ourselves and, share our, and reach out, thinking I'm sure some people will. And some people were actually like, just, and this was fine at the time. This was fine. We're like, actually, I don't really have capacity for that kind of friendship. So it's like, okay. And then a couple of people said, yes, I do want to have that kind of friendship. I was like, great. But when I sent the email, I was suddenly devastated. I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And I was crying because it just felt such a big thing. And then one of the people who'd said they would be, wanted to be friends and stuff, couldn't be for whatever reason. So I ended up with one person who was lovely, but it was a real shock to me. And I think one of the things that was happening when it was happening is I'd watched other people go through difficult stuff, and I'd seen how the community had rallied around them. And we had been going through really difficult stuff at the time. We'd been having problems with a neighbor. We'd having problems with the police because of it. The kids were really struggling. Both kids were in burnout, one for bullying, one because of autistic burnout. And life was becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And I was finding it harder and harder to relate to other people. And I was finding it harder when people asked me how I was, to do the whole I'm fine. And when I didn't, to watch the reaction on their faces when I told them the truth of my experience. and how people began to kind of avoid me. They sort of, a lot of things my brain started to kind of make up or find about those situations. And because it was really reminding me of what you were saying. It was like, all these people had known for a really long time we were going through really tough stuff. Then I sent the email out, and then I just started to disappear more and more and more. And I basically disappeared for 2 years, becoming more and more introverted, more and more unable, feeling like unsafe to be in community, being unsafe for being in conversation with people who didn't get the experience. Because every time I'd go out and try and do those things, response I get back was hurtful, and so I didn't want to go again. And I kept trying, and then my capacity to try got less. And it just really surprised me, like you say, that nobody ever reached out and said, "Are you okay? You've disappeared. Where are you? Are you okay?" And, there's a few times that I'd reached out and done things, but it was, and I still have a nice little group of friends who I see relative, but it was just that my husband sent me an article, and I think this is quite often people's experience, and he has this experience as well because he's the organizer of events. And when he stops organizing, no events happen, nothing, nobody meets, nobody does anything. And there was this article he sent me today where it was literally just saying, once I stopped going out to people, I realized it's almost like there's an imbalance. It's like you think you'll have a friendship, but you don't really matter to those people at all. But other people matter to them, but somehow or other you don't fit the criteria. And I hear that a lot with my clients as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you're putting in all the effort, you're doing all the things. I see it with my children and their friendships too.
Me too.
Put in all the effort, buy the gifts for birthdays and all kinds of things, and then hold them as they're heartbroken because the friend didn't even phone them on their birthday. That can just be, that's just so heartbreaking. I totally understand what you're saying about, that level of effort that you put in, and if your effort stops, then that friendship just collapses because your effort was the thing that was actually holding it all together.
Yes. And in the neurotypical world, the story is always, get out there, you need to be in community, you need to be in connection, and you need to, you should be, ask for what you need. And people used to go to me, well, if you need, why don't you ask for it? And I'd be like, no, I am asking for it. It's just nobody's coming back.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of the time the autistic experience as well and I watch it, like you said, with the kids too. I was watching this last week, my youngest at a camp. She was at a skate camp, and I was watching, and she just looks so alone all the time. And you can see all these other kids making friends and making friendships, and nobody interacting with her. And I just think, what is it? And I know I've read a lot about it, and I know what it is. It's the fact that we're different, right? We don't fit the mold. That's my understanding. What's yours?
Yeah, and I've seen it in workplaces too, and I think that's why I tend to revert to like the leadership role at work. Like even when I was in teaching, I would tend to sort of be the leader or the manager or those roles because I wouldn't need to have like put in or the friendships or the camaraderie or the like, hey, let's hang out after work kind of thing was never really expected from the manager or the leader. And I remember one of my bosses like actually reprimanding me because I wasn't enough of a people person, or I wasn't like, in there sort of like socializing and, doing all these things. And so then my go-to was like, well, okay, how can I serve people? That became my go-to rather than, because I can't be their friend. So how can I like serve them? How can I make the workplace really lovely for them?
Yeah.
But then I would feel the sting of like, well, no one's actually doing this for me.
That's it.
Yeah. But I also I tend to see if I do have people come round to my house, and I don't very often because I live on the outskirts of town, so it's hard for people to come out to me. And I used to have a friend group in Auckland, but when we moved up to Northland, I didn't make the same sort of amount of friends. But if people do come around, I tend to find myself just in the kitchen,
Right. Yeah.
cooking and doing all that kind of thing, because it just feels safer to me
Yeah.
to be doing those jobs rather than out there socializing.
Like a shield, isn't it?
Yeah. I almost think, because I do have a biblical background. I'm like, I'm just such a Martha.
Yes.
I'm always just cleaning things or carrying things,
Yeah.
but I realize it's just a mask, or it's just something that I can carry with myself so I don't feel so vulnerable
Yes.
in those situations.
Like a thorn response, really, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And I have one really close friendship that I've had for, my goodness, our older children are sort of in their early 20s now. So we've probably been friends better half of 20 years.
Yeah.
But the thing about her is we didn't realize that either of us were neurodivergent.
No.
But we have the type of friendship that when we see each other, we're have these big, deep, meaningful conversations. But between seeing each other, we might not even talk, or we might send the odd meme to each other.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that our friendship isn't strong or deep. It's just that sort of small talk, or the kind of connecting between meetups doesn't feel that important to us, which I thought was kind of unusual. The other thing that I've often realized is that if I'm not seeing somebody every day,
Out of sight, out
I
of mind.
sometimes filters them out.
Yes. Yeah.
And I used to think, what's wrong with you?
Yes.
You can't why can't you stay in touch with people? Or why can't you, phone them or keep up with their lives? And I mean, they didn't do the same for me either.
No.
So it's not totally on me, but I realized when I found out about the object permanence of neurodivergence, I was like, oh my goodness, that makes
100%.
so much sense to me now.
100%. And for me, it also really, because I thought a lot about, when I went to boarding school, I was, I'm not sure how much of this is a mask and how much of this is true, but I was very happy to have gone, and I enjoyed the experience. I don't think I was homesick. I don't remember being homesick at all. My sister was, but I wasn't. She was a bit younger than me. And I think that object permanence, which out of sight, out of mind more describes it, is something that probably helped me in that situation, because it's like, well, I'm here now, so this is where we are, this is what we're doing, and these are the people in my
Yeah.
I mean, half of me is like, was that a trauma response? Did we go into that?
Yeah.
I was just having a look. Kate's written something here. Let me have a look. I've made a list of all the friends, people I know, and ticked off each one as I contacted them. Yes, absolutely. It's almost like that tick list, isn't it? I'm being a good friend. I'm going through everybody. I'm keeping. Well, do you know what's interesting as well? So Kate says, I have no idea how to join the conversation. We could just text like this, Kate, or if you want to, you're more than welcome to come on and chat as well. If you want, we can invite you on too, whichever you'd like.
Absolutely. Totally down for it. Carry on.
Oh, no, I was just thinking about, I remember my mother-in-law saying to me, thinking about that, because you know how, in the other older generation, there was this sort of expectation, particularly of women, that they'd sort of keep the communication between all the family members, do all the birthday cards and all that kind of stuff. And I remember my mother-in-law saying to me, can you kind of send me an update of what's going on with the family? And I was just like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Just because that, to me, that would have just been a big burden that I would have found, way too much for me to hold.
Kate says, let's check out.
Yeah.
That's great. I'll text. But that level of kin keeping that often comes to us as well, right? We have to keep in contact with everybody in the family, and and I think that's like a whole different episode.
Yes.
Because that's massive. The other thing that I did notice, and I just wanted to come back to, because you mentioned it as well in your experience, and I see this a lot with the parents in my burnout groups, the parents, is that a lot of times when your child goes into burnout,
Yes.
and your world gets so incredibly small, it becomes you as the parent or the person, your identity shifts and changes just because of the level of the experience or the depth of the experience that you have. And the other people around you are not having that experience. And so you're changing, but the people around you aren't, and try to go and interact with those people again. It's really hard because it almost feels like you're talking a different language.
Exactly.
I don't know if you've
I remember going swimming with my swimming group, who I loved, and they'd start talking about, this really, really, a lot of conversation always about screen time and how awful it was and how all this stuff, and moaning about children not being able to do chores or showing off what it felt like to me, probably my nervous system interpretation, about the independence of the children, and that would be the swim. And by the time I come out of the swim, I just like, this is just, I found this whole conversation really hard to sit with without saying something. And then whenever I said something, I felt like it wasn't necessarily received very well.
Yeah. Or I often found, like, if I did go to social occasions and people would ask me, like, well, how have things been? How are children? What are they doing? I had absolutely no way to communicate to them about what was actually going on in my life, because A, they wouldn't understand. B, I would just be opening myself up to so much unsolicited advice or judgment, or people just, like, they can't seem to help themselves. They're just like trying to fix your problem for you, or
Have you tried?
yeah. And it's so exhausting that a lot of times it is a mask. You're just like, or you just sort of try really hard to disappear into the corner.
I had a very similar experience as well when we had a lot of issues with a neighbour, and he was absolutely awful, kind of really menaced us for 2 years. Went to court. It was all really, really horrible. But every time people would be, when I was kind of like recovering from it, people would be like, "Oh, how's stuff with the neighbour? How's your new house? Is it all great?" And I'd be, and it wasn't. And it wasn't for me. I hadn't finished grieving the experience. I was still really traumatized from it in so many ways. But everybody didn't, whenever I spoke to anybody that I was friends with, they wanted to hurry me through my grief, and they wanted for me to be all right. And so once I broke those sort of societal kind of expectations, conditions of the conversation by saying, no, I'm not all right. And yes, it's nice that isn't it great that I'm in a new house, but I'm still in the fact that I had to be forced to move from the place that I had chosen to live in. People would just be kind of almost as if I had said something kind of a bit revolting and a bit distasteful. And that was the impression that I got from people. And again, I understand why this happens and why people do that. And I think it's that sort of idea, as if they kind of lean into it a little bit. With anything, though, we're talking about that's outside of that sort of normal experience, the concern, you have to kind of understand that there's a possibility that something like that might happen to you as well. And I think that, have you heard of the just world theory?
Oh, no, tell me.
It's a fascinating thing. And I met a writer who's got chronic illness who was writing about it recently, and it was so, I was like, this is so cool. The just world theory is basically, people believe that the world is just, and it kind of keeps everybody feeling safe. And we believe that kind of bad things happen to bad people. And it's kind of like this contract of us cultural conditioning that this is the way it is. And so when things don't fit that mold or the experience is different, people automatically, it's why victims get blamed a lot. It's like, well, there must be something wrong with them because this couldn't possibly, because if this could happen to them and they're the same as me, this could happen to me. And that feels very unsafe. So therefore we kind of blame and make the person having the difficult experience the problem, start plotting the rows. And I've had friends of mine who've, I had a friend whose child suffered an assault, and neighbours and school mums and things would cross the road rather than, because it was almost like if that could happen to her child, it could happen to ours. And so we're almost kind of, so there's something in that as well. And I think that has something to do with that, when we share our experience and it's not necessarily received well, it's coming from a lot of that, like, wow, if we actually open up, there's a possibility it could happen to any of us.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same as, like, I think back to when I had a miscarriage and it was really difficult. Like, people would just avoid me. They wouldn't talk to me, I think perhaps part of that is that sort of like, wow, this could happen to me, or this is really, I don't have the words, or I don't quite know how to talk to this person.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you have these set things that people can be sad about certain things for a set period of time.
Absolutely. Even if like your partner or your parent or someone dies, you've only got like an X amount of time that you can be sad about it and grieve.
Yeah.
And then if you're past that, then people say, well, you just need to get over it now. You need to.
Yeah. And almost they have a conversation where they're asking you a question where they want you to confirm the positive, upbeat kind of response. And I don't know whether it's an autistic thing, but I find it really difficult in that situation because my PDA comes out and it feels like someone's trying to force me to say something that feels really honest, inauthentic to me.
Yeah.
And I just can't do it. Let me just, okay, it's just in Chinese medicine, grief takes 3 years to move through the body. Yeah, I would say that makes sense to me. And some, I really do think so too. There's so many different types of grief as well, right?
It is. One of the books on grief that I just really love is the book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller. And he talks about living in the ashes and how, in some Scandinavian cultures, the person who was grieving would like just their only job was to live in the ashes, tend the fires and grieve. And how, and I just love the way he kind of talks about the different aspects of grief because it makes so much sense to me and my experience. And I'm a firm believer that if we've got language, we can process our experience a lot better. But like even just the whole grief that we feel about having a different parenting experience, or the grief that we experience after getting a diagnosis, like of even though it confirms, like so many parents I know, or even like just late diagnosed people, we know we're different. The diagnosis or somebody to like validate that experience with, with a name. And then when we get it, it can bring up really unexpected grief in us.
I've heard that a lot from people too, particularly for that, because we can then hold ourselves with compassion. And it's like all the times that we weren't held with compassion, it's almost the grief for that younger person, isn't it? Who wasn't held with compassion for her brain and body's reaction to the world. Grief is such an important part of our work and our understanding, I think. I remember doing grief when I was doing my counselling degree as it was one of the electives, and I remember the teacher saying, this should be the course, not the elective.
Yeah, it's so huge.
Imagine futures, like you say, we have this idea of what our future's going to be. And I hear that a lot with people. We have this idea of what our future's going to be like, and it's different, and our kids' future's different to what we'd imagined and all of that stuff as well.
Yeah. It falls under that gate of grief of like what I expected but did not receive. And I think part of that of grief, and sorry, that's in Francis Vella, he talks about the 5 gates of grief. And under that gate as well is the community that we expected would rally around us, but did not come.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
It's that sort of realization that, and this is why, and I think I'll just read what Kate's written. Knowing and holding grief is such an important part of being a friend. Yes, it is. Those few people who hold you well in your life, like you were talking about your friend. I've got a couple of friends, and they take you through the seasons, don't they? You know, with the different experiences. And I think that was where I was thinking. One of the things that can feel so lovely is when you do meet neurokin, like Tanya, when you and I first met, it's like, you know,
Yeah.
and I find that often when I'm with neurodivergent people in community, it just feels so much safer.
It does. And I think what I see a lot of times is that the the attunement or the validation that we receive from meeting another person who is neurodivergent, because even though sometimes our lives are different, our stories are different, we have similar experiences that mirror each other's. But I also think that, it really brings me back to this one Brene Brown quote that I just love. And she said, empathy is not like walking in somebody else's shoes. It's understanding that your reality looks different to mine, but I can understand, or I can hold that it's really hard for you.
Yeah.
That's sort of like it, same experience, but the emotional experience, or like we've all experienced grief, or maybe not all of us, but we've all experienced sadness, or we've all experienced loss in some way. And when we can connect through that shared emotional experience, the actual physical experiences might not, but it's that sort of like, I see the truth in you, and you see the truth in me.
Yes. Yes. I agree. And I think there's something as well in when you, and this has been my experience. And again, I'm probably overgeneralizing, and this probably isn't like, again, this is I'm not saying this is the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I found is increasingly the people that I've really connected with in my original wider, bigger friendship group have turned out to got their own diagnosis and and there's something about that going in, and I wonder if part of it as well is this sort of cultural, societal sort of agreement that we all do small talk, and that we all, when somebody says, "How are you?" they really don't want to know. Whereas I found with the neurodivergent people, again, massive generalization, is that we go deep and we go quick, and all of that stuff is like if somebody asks you how you are, my assumption is that they want to know. And I think generally with the more autistic people or with the ADHD or neurodivergent people, that doesn't seem to be so much of an issue.
Yeah, I totally agree. You just think of something. So before I found out that I was neurodivergent, and I was kind of like, we were going through the beginnings of our discovery as a family and down the neurodivergent path, I did a lot of archetype work.
Yes.
And during that time, I really identified the wild woman, but also like the wise woman who just sort of like wants to like go really deep and doesn't have space for like frivolous conversations. I remember sharing with my friend, like my really good friend who's been my friend for 20 years. And we were like, yes, we're just such wise women. We just, we love those really deep conversations. Yeah. And then I found out afterwards that it's like, it's part of like our neurotype that we just can't do the small talk.
But I also think there's a vulnerability to the depth. And I think a lot of people it's interesting. There's a lot of people don't want to do the depth because it's too personal, which I get,
Yeah.
too vulnerable,
Yeah.
too scary, I think. Yeah.
It is. It is. But then, so when you do meet somebody that has had an experience of a similar emotional depth,
Yeah.
you can't not but talk about it because it feels really safe. And I see this, often with the parents that in my community, once, there's something that's really vulnerable and that they probably couldn't share in any other part of their life. And you probably see it too with, the woman and alcohol. And then that sort of opens the door for like all these other people to come in and share their similar experience. And I think in that way, community can be like incredibly healing because we don't just feel so alone in it anymore. Because the other aspect of it is that, and I'm just going to circle back a little bit, is that, this is like a really lonely experience that I know a lot of parents, especially of autistic children or children who are going through crisis experience, is that there are certain medical things that are socially acceptable to share. In an experience like that, people around us understand that.
Yes.
And it's easier. I'm not saying it's easy for the parent, but it's easier for people to understand. And it's easy for people to share like that burden with other people, not in like a really deep way, but in like, hey, this is happening in my family.
Yeah.
And for people to like rally around and say,
Yeah.
oh, like, hey, we'll bring you some meals. We'll, like do all these things.
Yes.
Sometimes when you have an experience like your child being hospitalized because of like mental health or, because of trying to unalive themselves or things like that, there is no place for parents to share where that would be understood and like that sort of rallying around of people like, coming in and trying to support you in ways. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, and it can feel so alone. You can feel so alone in that experience. And it's like, well, at the same, I'll tell you, and this is very much more lightweight, but what I really noticed is the change in like school when both my kids got a chronic fatigue diagnosis. Suddenly they had an illness that people understood. Before, when we were autistic burnout was the name that we were using, which I still fundamentally believe is the situation that we're in. The children were the problem, we were the problem. And it was extraordinary how different the behavior. Even this morning, my son came in late. I took him in, went to the office and they said, why is he late? And I said, oh, chronic fatigue. They went, oh, yeah. When I used to go autistic burnout would be, it was almost like lazy shit parent, no one trying hard enough.
Yeah. I just noticed that the case was happening in the comments.
That happened to me, and absolutely no one asked about my daughter. Yeah. And they were in mental health hospitals. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm so sorry that happened to you, Kate. Yeah, that's happened to me several times. And yeah, I know how lonely that can feel and just how horrible that is. Just sending you love, my friend.
People really don't know what to do. It's that almost walking the other side of the road. Again, that just world theory, it's kind of comes into the play again, I think. We want to think it's that people don't know what to say, but there's part of me that feels that the just world theory comes into it a little bit more than perhaps we might want to think it.
Yeah. No, and that's a reality that so many people are living. That more people are living that than we actually realize.
100%. And it's all a lot of the time on the parents, and primarily the mums are holding a lot of this stuff, and they've got nowhere and no one who, because 9 times out of 10. I mean, I've had similar in, where I've had groups where parents have got kids who have got a drug and alcohol problem. And, it's the same thing. Like suddenly a kid is, you know, you know, on the streets and in a really bad situation, their community falls apart, or in order to keep community, they have to talk about the weather when their heart's broken and their person that they love is going through hell, and they don't know how to help, and they don't know
Yeah.
what to do, and they have to, in order to maintain community, they have to pretend everything's okay, and it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also, the judgment, because the assumption typically with that is, well, you did something,
What
or
they
your
do.
parenting, what did you do to make your child turn towards drugs
Yeah,
and alcohol, right?
yeah,
Well, what did you do for your child to be anxious and
yeah,
depressed and burnt out?
yeah, yeah. And there's always this sort of like, there's a problem with them or there's a problem with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it couldn't just be that this is a really horrible situation, similar to any other horrible situation happening to a family.
Yeah. And also just no one thinks about the complexity of the systems in the world and the cultures
Oh
that we
my
live in
God.
as well, and how these things chronically fail families rather than the families are failing.
Absolutely. And the people that I know who've gone through similar things to what yourself and Kate have been talking about, what would constantly be happening for them would be that the kids would be sent back to the homes, and then the parents are then in this constant state of high vigil, and there's no support and no care and 9 times out of 10 it's, sat with the kind of key parent again who's, you know and there's all the other things that then come from that too, loss of earnings, loss of career, loss of, and yeah, it's very tricky. And then you've got the grief again of imagined futures, because futures are different to how you imagine them to be.
Oh, yeah. And it's, that that you're describing a part of my life that, happened not too long ago,
Yeah,
and it really does sit with you. And a lot of times, I know this is totally veering off the topic of friendships. Um, like part of my experience of how I felt about it was that I had dropped the ball as a parent. I hadn't tried hard enough. I hadn't been vigilant enough. I hadn't been a good enough parent. I think that's many parents who are in that same situation. That's, how a lot of us feel. And then it comes into that vigilance, because if I had just done such and such, this
yeah,
wouldn't have happened. So I'm going to work so that it doesn't happen again, and that I don't drop the ball. And then we end up in this like chronic sort of waiting, anticipatory sort of like waiting mode, where we're just like,
waiting for the
even,
shoes.
yeah, or even
Yeah,
when our children are like just off doing something,
yeah,
that playing on their device
yeah,
or hanging out doing something,
yeah,
we're just constantly in fight flight, like, okay, when are they going to need me again?
yeah,
When's the next crisis going to happen?
yeah.
And
Mm.
that's extremely exhausting.
Exactly, and very difficult for people outside of that experience to understand, but very, very common. And this is what's interesting,
Yeah.
is that we're all made, and this is and again with Brené Brown, we're all made to feel shame for some reason, having difficulties in our family, and it never was ours to hold, right? There's no
Yeah.
shame there.
No.
But yet there seems to be a requirement that we we accept blame or we accept shame for not being 100% well and buoyant and productive and playing the part of, what the society wants us to be, busy little workers, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times we are ways that just intensify that shame rather than curiosity or support or people saying, I can just see that life's really hard for you. Like, what can I do to help? But instead, we hear a lot of like, have you tried? Or a lot of like, I don't know, I'm just going to avoid you, or judgment, like, how could you? It's all your fault.
Yeah. And I think there's also, I notice as well, people take great pride in what's happening with their kids as if it's something that they did.
Yeah. Well, hey, we live in a society where parents are judged about how successful they are as parents by how well adjusted and how well their children are doing.
Yeah. It's just interesting because I wonder, that blame, so unhelpful, isn't it? It's interesting. One of the things I delight in seeing, and I was lucky to have, and I think you've had something similar, Tanya, is seeing my eldest child, even though he's went through hell and back with bullying and some really nasty stuff, all the way through, he's had a really kind of great group of neurodivergent, quirky LGBTIQ plus friends, and watching them enjoy each other's company in neurodivergent ways, enjoying and listening to them take turns to info dump, or like my son really loves to sing. And I know if that was in my neurotypical friendship groups or something, and even probably in some of my, kind of just learning where we are and, what our brains are like world, that kind of behavior is often regarded badly, like, oh, they're making it all about them, or, oh, they're not, they're interrupting, or, oh, they are just talking about one thing and they're not asking you how you are, and all of those kind of things. Whereas when I watch his friends interact, you can see like people taking turns, and it's okay. And if it's ready for him, if he wants to sing, his friends will listen and say, that's really brilliant. Whereas I think my youngest child is more, more high masking, really sort of trying to be like the neurotypical kind of people more at the moment. And I think that can be a harder ground to navigate because you're trying to be a neurotypical person, but you're actually neurodivergent, and that then they can kind of smell something's off, I feel.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, can't really sense, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've had spectrums of my children where they've had some really beautiful neurodivergent friendships with just wildly amazing, quirky kids. And then, we've had the bullying as well. That has not been great. But I know that all of my children have some really great friendships currently, which, is just really, really beautiful to see. So I love that. And I just noticed the time.
Are we done? Is it time to finish?
Yes. We're having such a lovely conversation. And I just want to say thank you, Kate, for joining us and sharing your lived experience with us. It's been so lovely to have somebody chatting with us.
Yeah.
And we both really value lived experience. So thank you.
I agree. Thanks so much, Kate. I appreciate you so much. Well, should we do our big moments then?
Yes.
Offer it out to Kate as well if she wants to play.
Yeah. Oh, I feel the echo on in my heart. Oh, my heart just feels warm reading that, Kate.
Heartbeat, which is unusual for me too.
Yeah. Okay, so magic moments. I just loved the other day. I was speaking to my son, and he's got a real fascination with tornadoes at the moment. And we just had the best conversation where he was just telling me all about these tornadoes. And then we had an actual tornado that happened in New Zealand, which was not great for the people, obviously, who were involved with the tornado. But just to see like the light in his eyes, able to like talk about it because he thought we don't get tornadoes in New Zealand at all. And I know destructive force, but I just delighted in seeing his autistic joy
Yeah.
from this experience that he's currently having and this special interest. And so that was just like a really magical moment where I got to experience his absolute like wonder and joy in something that he's currently enjoying. So yeah, that was my little moment.
That's beautiful. I love that too. And inviting anyone else, if you want to share a moment, a magical moment that you've had that filled you up with wonderful sensations, please feel free to. It's always lovely, I think, to end it that way. For me, I was very excited because on Friday last week, my son had just got his name change certification. And we had been delaying getting his provisional driver's license because we wanted to have it in the right name so we didn't have to change it. And so on Friday afternoon, we went and got the provisional. I don't know if that's what it's called, the learner kind of driver thing.
Yeah, what we call it the learner license.
Yeah,
but yeah, similar. Yeah.
And we went to the shop and did it, and we were expecting it to be really hard and then to be really, and because that's sort of to be our experience with things. So we did all this ID and letters from the council, all this stuff, and they were so lovely. And they were just like, nah, brilliant, it's lovely. And when people are like that, and it just, everything's so beautiful and kind, as it should be. Like the opposite of other experiences that sometimes you have. Like you have an idea that something's going to be really lovely and it isn't, but this one was. And when he came out and he held his little license, it was so cute.
Oh, please.
Yeah, so that was mine. It was a lovely moment. Very, very, very excited.
Oh, well, congratulations to him. Like that's such and just lovely. Thanks for sharing that, Emma.
Yeah, no worries at all.
Yeah. And if anybody's listening to the show either now or even if you're listening to it on wherever you get podcasts and you want to share your magic moment in the comments, then we always appreciate that. So, thank you
and
so
we'll
much.
read them for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. All right, my lovelies. Well, thank you all. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Kate. Lovely to be with you, Tanya.
Yes, and have a beautiful weekend.
You too, my love. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for spending this time with us.
If this conversation helped you to feel a little less alone,
Or you're a late diagnosed mum navigating alcohol and body image in midlife,
or you're parenting a neurodivergent child in burnout and need support, you're welcome in our communities. Links are in the show notes. We'd love you to share this with another mum who might need it too. Please be sure to like, comment, or subscribe so that you can be notified when new episodes air. This also helps the podcast reach more mums who need it.
This podcast shares a lived experience, not medical advice. Please reach out to a professional if you need individual support. We respect a range of lived experience. All guests appearing on the show are talking from their own individual lives, and their view may not reflect the host's perspective.